The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for the past 15 years. Amy Davis ran through the cornfields, her little brother Danny chasing after her with a toy spaceship in his hands. The golden crops swayed in the gentle breeze, ready for harvest in just 2 weeks. "Wait for me," Danny called out, his short legs working hard to keep up with his sister. Amy laughed and slowed down. She was 10 years old and felt very grown up taking care of her 6-year-old brother while there. Parents worked in the processing plant. The colony of New Haven was home to 50,000 people who had come here to build a new life far from Earth. Governor Lynda Carter stood on her office balcony, watching the children play in the distance. She had been a diplomat on Earth before, coming here to lead the colony. Lynda believed that humans and aliens could live together in peace. The Zelani, the lizard-like aliens who lived on nearby worlds, had been good neighbors for years, but lately something felt wrong. The Zelani traders had stopped coming to the weekly markets. Their ships no longer landed at the spaceport. When Lynda tried to contact their leaders, she got no answer. Jake Morrison, the head of colony security, walked into Lynda's office. His face looked worried. Jake was a big man with kind eyes, but today those eyes showed fear. "Governor, we need to talk," Jake said. "My sensors are picking up ships in the outer system. Lots of them." Lynda turned from the window. "Zelani ships?" "Yes, but not like the trading vessels we're used to. These are warships, big ones." Lynda felt her stomach drop. "How many?" "At least 50, maybe more coming." Down in the medical center, Dr. Kevin Shaw was treating a farmer who had hurt his back lifting grain sacks. Kevin was a gentle man who had come to New Haven to help people live better lives. He loved the peaceful colony where the biggest medical emergency was usually a broken bone or a bad cold. "Dr. Shaw, please come to the communication center," a voice said over the speakers. Kevin finished with his patient and walked quickly to the communication center. When he got there, Jake Morrison was trying to contact the Zelani ships on all frequencies. "This is New Haven Colony calling Zelani vessels. Please respond. This is New Haven Colony. We are a peaceful settlement. Please respond." The radio stayed silent for long minutes, and a cold voice spoke in perfect human language. "Humans of New Haven, you have 30 minutes to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Jake asked quickly. "To die." The transmission ended. For a moment, nobody in the room could speak. Then alarms started going off all over the colony. Lynda's voice came over the emergency speakers. "All citizens, this is Governor Carter. We are under threat. Please move to the emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Move to the shelters now." Amy grabbed Danny's hand as they heard the alarms. "Come on, we have to go home and find Mom and Dad." They ran toward the town center where their parents worked. All around them, people were rushing toward the underground shelters that had been built when the colony was founded. No one had ever thought they would actually need them. The Zelani ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds. They were huge black vessels that blocked out the sun. Energy weapons began firing down at the colony buildings. The first shots hit the power plant, sending a massive explosion across the valley. Amy and Danny reached their parents just as the second wave of attacks began. Their mother, Carol Davis, pulled them close while their father, Pete Davis, looked up at the sky in horror. "The shelters," Pete said. "We have to get to the shelters." Families ran through the streets as buildings exploded around them. The Zelani weapons didn't just destroy buildings. They burned everything, leaving nothing but ash and twisted metal. Jake Morrison tried to organize the defense, but the colony's small security force had only light weapons. They were farmers and scientists, not soldiers. Their few defensive guns couldn't even reach the Zelani ships. In the medical center, Kevin Shaw was helping wounded people when a Zelani ground force landed near the hospital. The alien soldiers were 7 feet tall, with gray scales and yellow eyes. They carried energy rifles that could cut through metal walls. Kevin put his hands up and stepped forward. "We are medical personnel. We're treating wounded civilians. Please. These people need help." The Zelani soldier looked at him for a moment. Then it raised its weapon and fired. Kevin fell to the ground, his life ending instantly. The other soldiers moved through the hospital, shooting every patient and doctor they found. Amy and her family had made it to Shelter 7, one of the largest underground bunkers. Hundreds of people were crowded inside, holding their children, and praying that the thick concrete walls would protect them. But the Zelani had planned this attack carefully. They knew where every shelter was located. Special drilling weapons cut through the concrete like it was paper. Gas poured into the shelter, choking everyone inside. Amy held Danny's hand as the gas filled their lungs. She could hear her mother crying and her father coughing. Around them, neighbors and friends were collapsing one by one. High above in the communication center, Jake Morrison managed to send one last message before a Zelani bomb destroyed the building. His voice was weak, but clear as he spoke into the emergency transmitter. "This is New Haven Colony to any human ship or station receiving this message. We are under attack by Zelani forces. They are not taking prisoners. They are killing everyone. Men, women, children, even the wounded in the hospitals. This is not a military action. This is murder. They're hunting down children who try to hide. They're burning people alive. Please tell Earth what happened here. Tell them the Zelani did this for no reason except to test us. Tell them we tried to surrender, but they wouldn't let us. Tell them about the children. Tell them." The transmission cut off as the building collapsed in flames. In the deep mining tunnels 3 miles underground, maintenance workers Ben Torres, Lisa Park, and Joe Miller felt the explosions above them. They tried to use their communication equipment, but got only static. When they finally reached the surface 6 hours later, New Haven was gone. 50,000 people had lived and worked and laughed in this valley that morning. Now there was only smoke and ash and silence. The Zelani had not just destroyed a colony. They had erased it completely, as if those 50,000 lives had never mattered at all. Ben Torres found a working emergency transmitter in the ruins. With shaking hands, he sent a message to the nearest human military base. "This is New Haven Colony. We are the only survivors. They killed everyone. All of them. Even the babies in the hospital. They made us watch our world die." The 3 survivors stood in the ruins of their home, surrounded by the ashes of their friends and families. In the distance, the Zelani ships were already leaving, their mission complete. They had tested humanity's resolve and found humans too. Be weak and emotional creatures not worthy of respect. It was the greatest mistake the Zelani would ever make. The emergency message from New Haven reached Earth 3 days later through the Quantum Communication Network. In the Global Defense Council building in Geneva, President Julie Adams was having her morning coffee when Admiral Paul Stevens burst into her office. "Madam President, you need to see this immediately," Paul said. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. Julie had known Paul for 20 years. She had never seen him look so disturbed. "What is it, Paul?" "New Haven is gone. All of it. 50,000 people." Julie set down her coffee cup carefully. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" Paul activated the wall screen and played the recording from Ben Torres. The maintenance worker's voice was broken as he described finding the bodies of children in the shelters, hospitals burned with patients still inside, and Zelani soldiers hunting down anyone who tried to escape. "They didn't want our land or our resources," Ben's voice continued. "They did this to test us, to see if humans would fight back or just cry about it. They called us weak. They said we weren't worthy of galactic civilization. Julie watched the footage that the 3 survivors had managed to record. Bodies of families lying together in the shelters where they had died holding each other. The burned remains of the hospital where Dr. Kevin Shaw had tried to save lives until the very end. Children's toys scattered among the ashes of homes. Jesus Christ, Julie whispered. They murdered babies. Paul nodded grimly. The footage gets worse. The Zelani filmed some of it themselves. They sent copies to other alien governments as a warning about human weakness. Julie stood up slowly. She had been president for 6 years and had dealt with many crises, but nothing like this. Call an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Get every world leader online within the hour. Already done, Madam President. They're waiting. In the secure conference room. The meeting was held in complete silence as the world leaders watched the evidence. Chancellor Klaus Weber of the European Federation walked out of the room when the footage showed Zelani soldiers shooting children who were trying to surrender. Prime Minister Chong Lu of the Asian Confederation sat with tears running down his face. Secretary of Defense Carl Murphy was the first to speak when the presentation ended. We need to respond immediately. Every day we wait, other alien species will think we're too weak to protect our own people. What kind of response? Asked President Adams. Total war, Carl said without hesitation. Wipe the Zelani off the map. All of them. Julie held up her hand. Let's not make decisions while we're emotional. Maybe we can find a diplomatic solution. Diplomatic? Carl's voice rose. They slaughtered 50,000 civilians and made videos about it. What exactly would you like to negotiate? Admiral Stevens opened a folder. Madam President, our intelligence suggests this attack was planned for months. The Zelani government approved it as a test of human resolve. They wanted to see if we would respond with force or with words. Then we give them words first, Julie decided. I'll send Ambassador Helen Parker to their homeworld with an ultimatum. They surrender everyone responsible for the massacre, or they face the consequences. Carl shook his head. That's exactly what they're expecting. They think we're too soft to actually fight. Maybe we can prove them wrong without starting a war that could spread across the galaxy. Julie replied. Ambassador Helen Parker was a skilled diplomat who had negotiated peace treaties with 3 different alien species. She believed in the power of communication to solve conflicts. When President Adams asked her to carry the ultimatum to the Zelani homeworld, Helen accepted immediately. I've read the reports from New Haven, Helen told the president before leaving. What they did was evil. But if we respond with the same brutality, we become no better than them. Helen's ship reached the Zelani homeworld 2 weeks later. The planet was called Zephyr Prime, a hot world with cities built into the sides of mountains. Helen requested a meeting with the Zelani High Council to deliver Earth's demands. The Zelani leaders agreed to meet with her, but not in private. They broadcast the meeting live across their planet and to other alien worlds. They wanted everyone to see how they dealt with human weakness. Helen stood before the High Council in their great stone chamber. The Zelani leaders were massive creatures, with gray scales and cold yellow eyes. They looked down at her from high stone chairs like judges at a trial. Humans of Earth, spoke Council Leader Vexstar in his deep voice. You come here to make demands? You whose people died like insects when we tested your strength. Helen kept her voice calm and professional. The government of Earth demands that you surrender all individuals responsible for the New Haven massacre. They will be tried for war crimes under galactic law. You have 72 hours to comply. The Zelani leaders looked at each other and began laughing. It was a horrible sound, like rocks grinding together. Vexstar leaned forward in his chair. And if we refuse your demands, little human, what will you do? Send more diplomats to speak soft words at us? Earth will respond as it sees fit to protect its citizens, Helen replied. Your citizens are dead, Vextar said coldly. We killed them all, the strong children, the weak children, the sick ones in their beds. We killed them because they were human, and humans are a weak species that does not deserve to exist among the stars. Helen felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Those were innocent people, farmers and doctors and teachers. They had done nothing to harm you. They existed, Vextar said. That was enough. The council leader made a gesture to his guards. 2 Zelani soldiers grabbed Helen's arms and forced her to her knees. Vextar stood up and walked down to where she knelt. You want to know what we think of human diplomacy? He asked. Then he pulled out a curved blade and cut Helen's throat in one quick motion. Helen fell forward, her blood spreading across the stone floor. The Zelani leaders continued laughing as she died. Vextar picked up her severed head and held it up for the cameras. This is what we think of human weakness, he announced. Tell your Earth leaders that they can send as many diplomats as they want. We will send them all back the same way. The broadcast ended. Within hours, the recording was being played on every human world and station in known space. The image of Ambassador Helen Parker's murder was seen by billions of people across human civilization. President Julie Adams watched the recording in her office with Admiral Stevens and Secretary Murphy. When it ended, she sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was very quiet and very cold. How many ships do we have? Active fleet numbers about 200 vessels, Admiral Stevens replied. But if we activate the reserve fleets and convert civilian ships. All of them, Julie interrupted. Every ship we have. Every weapon. Every soldier. Carl Murphy leaned forward. Madam President? Julie stood up and walked to the window that looked out over Lake Geneva. In the distance, she could see families. Walking in the park, children playing on swings, people living normal, peaceful lives. They wanted to test our resolve, she said without turning around. They killed 50,000 innocent people to see if we would fight back. Then they murdered our ambassador and laughed about it. They think mercy makes us weak. She turned to face the 2 men. Her eyes were filled with a cold fury that neither of them had ever seen before. Activate Protocol 7. Full military mobilization. I want every human world, every colony, every station, contributing to the war effort. The Zelani wanted to see what humans do when pushed too far. They're about to find out. Admiral Stevens felt a chill run down his spine. Protocol 7 had been written 50 years ago, but never used. It authorized the complete transformation of human civilization into a war machine. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource would be turned toward one goal, total victory. Madam President, he said carefully, Protocol 7 means total war. No limits, no restrictions. Are you sure? Julie Adams looked at the image frozen. On her screen, Ambassador Helen Parker's kind face, a woman who had spent her life trying to make peace between different species. A woman who had died because she believed words could solve any problem. They called us weak, Julie said. They're about to learn the difference between being peaceful and being weak. Send the authorization codes to every human world. Tell them what happened here. Tell them it's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of when someone hurts our children. Carl Murphy was already working on his tablet, sending encrypted messages to military commanders across human space. Within hours, the largest war machine in galactic history would begin to wake up. The Zelani had wanted to test human resolve. They were about to discover that they had made the worst mistake in their species' history. The authorization codes reached every human world within 6 hours. On Mars, Factory supervisor Maria Santos was overseeing the production of farming equipment when the emergency message arrived. She read it twice, then walked to the emergency communication panel she had never used in 15 years of work. "This is Mars Industrial Complex 7, she announced over the facility-wide speakers. "We are switching to Protocol 7 production immediately. All farming equipment lines are now producing military hardware. All civilian ship construction is now warship construction. This is not a drill." The workers in the factory stopped what they were doing and looked at each other. Most of them had never heard of Protocol 7, but when Maria played the footage from New Haven and the recording of Ambassador Parker's murder, they understood dot within 2 hours. Machines that had been building tractors were now building tank components. Assembly lines that produced civilian transports were being retooled to create military fighters. No one complained. No one asked questions. They had seen what the Zelani did to human children. On the orbital shipyards above Earth, Admiral Paul Stevens watched the most incredible sight of his military career. Ships that had been converted to civilian use years ago were being stripped down and rebuilt as warships. The USS Liberty, humanity's largest battleship, had been turned into a colony transport 5 years earlier. Now hundreds of workers swarmed over its hull, installing weapons that had been locked in storage since the last major conflict. Captain Steve Collins stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the reconstruction through the main view screen. Steve was a veteran of the border conflicts with the Krillian Empire, but those had been small battles over mining rights. This was different. This was personal. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "Admiral Stevens is requesting a video conference." "Put him through," Steve replied. Admiral Stevens appeared on the main screen, his face grim but determined. "Captain Collins, you're now in command of Battle Group 7. Your orders are simple. Make the Zelani regret what they've done." "How many ships do I get?" Steve asked. "Every ship we can build, repair, or convert. Right now, that's about 300 vessels. By the time you reach Zelani space, it'll be closer to 500. Steve felt his breath catch. 500 ships? "Sir, that's the largest fleet in human history." "Yes, it is. And it's not large enough. We're building more." Across human space, the transformation was happening everywhere. On the research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Monica Torres was working on terraforming technology when the Protocol 7 order arrived. Monica had spent her career finding ways to make dead planets livable for human colonists. Now she was being asked to reverse that technology, to turn it into something that could make living planets dead. "You want me to weaponize terraforming equipment?" she asked during her video conference with Earth Command. "The Zelani turned our peaceful colony into ash and bones," replied General Tony Wright from his office in the Pentagon. "We want to show them what that feels like." Monica looked at the equations on her screen. Terraforming worked by carefully balancing atmospheric chemicals and temperatures to support life. If those same systems were used in reverse, they could strip the atmosphere from a planet in days instead of years. "I can do it," she said quietly. "But General, this technology could kill billions of people. The Zelani killed our people without warning and without mercy. They filmed it and laughed about it. How much mercy do you think they deserve?" Monica thought about the footage she had seen from New Haven. Children's bodies in the underground. Shelters. Hospitals burned while patients screamed inside. She began rewriting her equations. On the mining colony of Titan, workers were converting industrial equipment into weapons. Mining lasers became ship-mounted cannons. Ore processing plants became ammunition factories. Colony manager Dave Thompson had come to Titan to build a peaceful life far from Earth's wars. Now he was helping to build the most destructive fleet humanity had ever assembled. "My daughter was going to visit New Haven next month," Dave told. his workers during the shift change. She wanted to see the famous cornfields and meet the children there. Now there are no cornfields, no children. The Zelani made sure of that. The workers listened in silence. Many of them had friends or family who lived on rim colonies like New Haven. They knew it could have been their loved ones in those underground shelters. "We're miners, not soldiers," Dave continued. "But we can build weapons for the people who will fight for us. We can make sure our soldiers have the tools they need to bring justice to the monsters who did this." The transformation happened with incredible speed. Human civilization had been built on the idea of peaceful expansion and cooperation. But underneath that peaceful exterior was an industrial capacity that shocked even humanity's leaders. When every factory, every shipyard, every research station focused on the same goal, the results were overwhelming. Captain Collins received daily reports on the growing fleet. Ships that had been in mothballs for decades were being brought back to service. Civilian transports were being armed and armored. Even scientific research vessels were being equipped with experimental weapons. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we now have confirmation on fleet composition. 412 active warships, 103 converted civilian vessels, and 207 support ships. Over 700 ships." Collins said in amazement, "How are we going to coordinate something that large?" "The computer systems are being networked together," the officer replied. "Every ship will share targeting and tactical information instantly. The fleet will fight as one massive weapon." The most shocking part of the military buildup was how quickly human society reorganized itself. There were no protests against the war effort, no resistance to the massive industrial conversion. Even the most peaceful colonies contributed everything they had. On the Quaker colony of New Eden, where pacifism was a core belief, colony leader Ruth Baker held an emergency meeting. The colonists had sworn never to support violence of any kind. The Zelani murdered 50,000 innocent people, Ruth told the gathered families. They killed children who were trying to surrender. They burned hospitals. They filmed it and laughed. The colonists sat in silence as they considered her words. Finally, an elderly farmer named Samuel Green stood up. "My granddaughter lives on. New Harmony Colony," he said. "She's 7 years old. If we don't stop the Zelani now, they might decide to test human resolve again. They might choose New Harmony next time." The vote was unanimous. Even the pacifist colony would contribute too. The war effort. They wouldn't make weapons, but they would provide food and medical supplies for the fleet. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons. Medical nanobots designed to heal injuries were reprogrammed to attack alien biology. Fusion. Reactors built for peaceful energy were converted into bombs, capable of destroying entire cities. The galaxy watched in shock as humanity's true industrial capacity revealed itself. Alien species that had dismissed humans as emotional or weak suddenly realized they had been seeing only what humans chose to show them. Ambassador Kretak of the Vorthan Empire sent an urgent message to his government. "We have underestimated the humans. Their industrial capacity exceeds our own by at least 3 to 1. If they can build this many warships in response to one attack, what could they do if truly threatened?" Other alien governments began sending diplomatic messages to Earth, offering support and alliance. Species that had ignored humanity for decades suddenly wanted to be friends. They had seen the footage from New Haven, and they had seen humanity's response. Captain Collins stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty as the massive fleet prepared to depart for Zelani space. Through the view screen, he could see hundreds of ships stretching out in formation as far as the eye could see. Each ship carried weapons that could level cities. Together, they carried enough firepower to destroy entire worlds. Communications. Open a channel to all ships. Collins ordered. Channel open, sir. Collins looked out at the largest war fleet in galactic history. Ships crewed by farmers and miners and scientists who had become soldiers overnight. People who had come to space seeking peace, but were now bringing war to those who had murdered their children. This is Admiral Collins to all ships of the Justice. Fleet, he said. The Zelani called us weak because we choose diplomacy over violence. They called us emotional because we mourn our dead. They thought our compassion made us easy targets. He paused, thinking of the footage from New Haven. Children's. Toys scattered among the ashes. Families who had died holding each other in the underground shelters. They were wrong. Our compassion is not weakness. It's a choice. And when someone murders our children and laughs about it, we choose to show them what human strength really looks like. The fleet began moving toward the edge of the solar system. 700 ships carrying the fury of an entire species. The Zelani had wanted to test human resolve. They were about to discover that they had awakened something terrible and unstoppable dot in the deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Alien observers watched the human fleet depart. Many of them began sending urgent warnings to their home governments. The humans were no longer the peaceful species they had pretended to be. The human fleet arrived at the outer edge of Zelani space after 3 weeks of travel. Admiral Collins stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, looking at the star charts that showed 15 Zelani colony worlds and their heavily defended homeworld of Zephyr Prime. Communications, send a message on all Zelani frequencies, Collins ordered. Channel open, sir. Collins spoke in a calm, clear voice that carried to every Zelani world and ship. This is Admiral Steve Collins of the Human Justice Fleet. We are here to collect the individuals responsible for the New Haven massacre and the murder of Ambassador Helen Parker. You have 24 hours to evacuate all civilian populations from military installations and surrender the war criminals. After that deadline, we will begin military operations. The response came quickly from Zephyr Prime. Council Leader Vex-Tar. Voice was filled with amusement. Human Admiral, you surprise us. We expected you to send more diplomats to die. Instead, you bring ships to die. How many vessels do you have? 20? 50? 732 warships, Collins replied. Matter-of-Factly. The communication channel went silent for several long minutes. When Vex-Tar spoke again, his voice had lost its mocking tone. You lie. Humans do not have that many warships. We didn't until you murdered our children. Scan our fleet if you don't believe me. On Zephyr Prime, Zelani military commanders were staring at their sensor readings in disbelief. The human fleet was massive beyond anything they had imagined possible. Hundreds of ships, many larger than anything in the Zelani Navy. How did they build so many ships so quickly? Asked General Krixta. It doesn't matter, Vex-Tar replied. They are still weak humans. When we defeated their single colony, they will break and run like frightened animals. But privately, Vex-Tar was worried. Intelligence reports had said humans were peaceful, emotional creatures who avoided violence. This fleet suggested otherwise. The 24-hour deadline passed with no response from the Zelani. Admiral Collins gave the order to begin operations. The first target was the outer colony of Zelani Minor, a world with 3 million civilians. And a major military shipyard. Commander Lisa Garcia led the assault force toward the planet. Lisa had lost her brother in the border conflicts 5 years earlier, but this was different. This wasn't about territory or resources. This was about justice for murdered children. All civilian areas have been evacuated, her tactical officer reported. Only military installations remain active. Good. Begin the demonstration. Lisa didn't want to kill innocent Zelani civilians. That would make humans no better than the monsters who had destroyed New Haven. But she wanted the Zelani, military to understand exactly what they were facing. The human ships surrounded Zelani Minor and began using their converted terraforming technology. Instead of making the planet more livable, they reversed the process. The atmosphere began changing as huge machines worked to strip away the gases that supported life. On the planet's surface, Zelani military commanders watched in horror as their green, living world slowly turned gray and lifeless. Plants died. Rivers dried up. The sky changed from blue to brown as the atmosphere was deliberately poisoned. What are they doing? General Mortex asked from the military command center. They're killing our world, his aide replied. Not quickly, like a bombardment, slowly. They want us to watch it die. The process took 3 days. The human fleet maintained complete control of the system while Zelani Minor was transformed from a garden world into a dead rock. When it was finished, Admiral Collins sent another message. Zelani Minor Military Command, your world is now uninhabitable. Your shipyard is destroyed. Your fleet is gone. This is what happens when you refuse our demands. Surrender the war criminals, or we move to the next target. The Zelani military finally began to understand what they were facing. This wasn't a human attempt at conquest. It was systematic, methodical destruction designed to eliminate their ability to make war. General Tony Wright coordinated the assault on 3 different Zelani systems simultaneously. Tony had been fighting alien enemies for most of his career, but he had always followed the laws of war. Civilians were protected. Prisoners were treated humanely. Military targets were struck precisely. The Zelani had shown no such restraint. At New Haven, they had murdered children and filmed it for entertainment. So Tony decided to show them what human warfare looked like when the rules were removed. All ships begin surgical strikes on military installations, he ordered. I want every Zelani warship destroyed, every weapons factory eliminated, every military base reduced to rubble. But avoid civilian casualties. We are not monsters like them. The human assault was devastating in its precision. Zelani warships that had seemed powerful were destroyed in minutes by the advanced human weapons. Military bases built into mountains were cracked open by focused energy beams. Weapons factories disappeared in carefully controlled explosions. But human forces went out of their way to protect Zelani civilians. When a Zelani hospital was built next to a military command center, human Marines landed and evacuated all the patients before destroying the command center. When civilian refugee ships tried to flee the battle zones, human escort vessels protected them from getting caught in the crossfire. The message was clear. Humanity would show no mercy to those who had murdered their children, but they would not become the same kind of monsters. On Zephyr Prime, Council leader Vexstar watched the reports from the outer colonies with growing fear. In just 2 weeks, the humans had destroyed or crippled 7 Zelani military installations. They had eliminated over half of the Zelani fleet, and they had done it while protecting Zelani civilians better than the Zelani military protected them. They fight like machines, General Crixtha reported. No emotion, no anger, just cold calculation. Every target is precisely chosen for maximum military impact. But they spare our civilians, Maxstar said thoughtfully. Why? Because they are not us, replied Intelligence Chief Laxara. We killed their civilians to test their resolve. They kill only our soldiers to eliminate our threat. They are showing us the difference between war and murder. Vexstar began to realize the enormous mistake his people had made. They had thought human emotion made them weak. But human emotion also included a sense of justice. That made them far more dangerous than any purely logical species. The siege of the Zelani homeworld began exactly 50 days after the New Haven massacre. Admiral Collins had planned it that way deliberately. 1 day for every 1,000 colonists who had died. All Zilani ships, this is your final warning, Collins broadcast to Zephyr Prime. Surrender the individuals responsible for the New Haven massacre. Surrender those who murdered Ambassador Parker. You have 12 hours. The response came from a different voice. General Kriksta had taken control of the Zilani government in a military coup. Vexstar and the council leaders who had ordered the massacre were under arrest. Human Admiral, this is General Kriksta. We are prepared to surrender the war criminals. We request only that you spare our civilian population. Collins considered the offer. The easy thing would be to accept and end the war quickly. But he thought about the children of New Haven who had died in the underground shelters, about Ambassador Parker, who had believed in the power of diplomacy right up until the moment they cut her throat. General, your offer is noted. But you harbored these criminals for 50 days while they boasted about murdering our children. Justice delayed is justice denied. We will take the war criminals ourselves. The battle for Zephyr Prime was the largest space battle in galactic history. The remaining Zilani fleet fought desperately to protect their homeworld, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Human ships that had been scientific research vessels 6 months earlier now carried weapons that could crack open planetary defense shields. Commander Lisa Garcia led the ground assault on the Zilani capital city. Her Marines landed in the government district with one simple mission: capture the individuals responsible for New Haven and bring them back alive for trial. The fighting was intense but brief. Zilani soldiers who had laughed while murdering human children found themselves facing human soldiers who showed no mercy but fought with deadly precision. Every Zilani defensive position was methodically eliminated. Every escape route was blocked. Lisa herself cornered Vexstar in his private chambers. The council leader who had mocked human weakness was now cowering behind his desk, begging for mercy. Please, Vexstar said in broken human language, I surrender. I was only following orders. Lisa looked at him with cold eyes. The children at New Haven tried to surrender too. You killed them anyway. Now you're coming with us to face trial for what you did. Vexstar was dragged from his chambers in chains, along with the other council leaders who had planned and approved the massacre. They would face justice under human law, which meant they would get a fair trial with evidence and witnesses. It was more than they had given the children of New Haven. As the battle for Zephyr Prime ended, Admiral Collins sent a message to all remaining Zilani forces throughout their territory. The war criminals have been captured. All Zilani military forces will surrender immediately and submit to disarmament. Any world or ship that continues to resist will be treated as a legitimate military target. The surrender was swift and complete. The Zilani, the War Crimes Tribunal, began 3 months after the fall of Zephyr Prime. In a specially constructed courthouse on the human military base orbiting the former Zilani homeworld, the individuals responsible for the New Haven massacre faced justice. Under human law, Judge Patricia Moore presided over the proceedings. She was a respected legal expert who had spent 30 years ensuring that justice was served fairly and completely. Even now, facing the monsters who had murdered 50,000 innocents, she was determined to follow the law exactly. The defendants will receive a fair trial with full legal representation, Judge Moore announced on the first day. They will be allowed to present evidence and call witnesses. They will receive the same justice that they denied to the children of New Haven. Vexstar and the other council leaders sat in the defendant's box, their scales gray with fear. They had expected to be executed immediately after their capture. Instead, the humans had given them lawyers and allowed them to prepare a defense. Why? Vexstar asked his human defense attorney. Why give us a trial when you could simply kill us? Attorney Mark Johnson looked at his client with barely controlled disgust. Because that's what separates us from you. We believe in justice, not revenge. The evidence against the Zelani leaders was overwhelming. The humans had recovered the original communications ordering the attack on New Haven. They had the video. Recordings that the Zelani had made while murdering civilians. They had testimony from the 3 survivors who had witnessed the aftermath. Most damning of all, they had Vextar's own statements boasting about the massacre and explaining that it had been done to test human resolve. The defendants planned and executed the deliberate murder of 50,000 civilian men, women, and children. Prosecutor Sarah Williams told the court. They filmed these murders for entertainment. They showed no mercy to wounded, to elderly, to infants. This was not war. This was genocide. The trial lasted 2 weeks. When it ended, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The sentence was death by lethal injection, carried out humanely and without cruelty. Vextar's last words before his execution were, "We underestimated you. We thought compassion made you weak. We were wrong." While the trials proceeded, the human fleet continued its work of dismantling the Zelani military infrastructure. Every weapons factory was destroyed or converted to peaceful use. Every warship was either scrapped or taken into human service. Every military installation was systematically eliminated, but the humans were careful not to harm Zelani civilians. Food and medical supplies were distributed to Zelani worlds that had lost their infrastructure during the war. Human engineers helped rebuild civilian facilities that had been damaged in the fighting. General Tony Wright oversaw the occupation of former Zelani space. "We're not here to conquer or colonize," he told his commanders. "We're here to make sure the Zelani can never again threaten peaceful civilians. Once that's done, they can govern themselves however they want." The transformation of Zelani space took 2 years. When it was complete, the Zelani retained their homeworld and their civilian colonies, but they had no military capability beyond basic police forces. They would never again be able to launch attacks on other species. President Julie Adams addressed the galaxy from the site of the former New Haven colony. Behind her, construction crews were beginning to build a memorial to the 50,000 who had died there. "We did not want this war," she said to the assembled alien ambassadors and human colonists. "We offered the Zelani friendship and trade. They responded with genocide. We offered them diplomacy. They responded by murdering our ambassador." She paused, looking out over the field where Amy and Danny Davis had played on their last morning alive. "Some species have asked why we responded with such overwhelming force. The answer is simple, because evil must be stopped completely, or it will return. The Zelani tested our resolve and found that human compassion has limits. When someone hurts our children, those limits are reached." The memorial to New Haven was completed 6 months later. It was a simple but powerful structure, 50,000 small lights arranged in the pattern of the original colony. Each light represented one life that had been lost. At night, the memorial could be seen from orbit, a reminder of the price of testing human resolve. Admiral Collins, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, established the New Haven Memorial Fleet as a permanent rapid response force. Its mission was simple: protect human colonies and ensure that no other species would ever again think humans were too weak to defend their own people. This fleet exists because 50,000 people died when aliens decided to test our strength, Collins told the graduating class of new officers. It will continue to exist as long as there are those who mistake human kindness for human weakness. The political effects of the Zelani War reshaped the entire galaxy. Species that had ignored humanity for decades suddenly competed to establish alliance treaties. The Vorthan Empire, which had previously refused even to trade with humans, sent their crown prince to Earth to personally negotiate a mutual defense pact. Ambassador Kree Tak of the Vorthons explained his government's change of heart to President Adams. We observed your industrial capacity during the war. When threatened, you converted your entire civilization into a war machine in a matter of weeks. We would prefer to have such a people as friends rather than enemies. Other alien governments reached similar conclusions. The Krillian Empire, which had fought border conflicts with humanity for years, immediately sued for peace and offered territorial concessions. The Centauri Federation proposed a joint military command to coordinate defense against common threats. Even species that had never interacted with humans began sending diplomatic missions to Earth. They had seen the footage from New Haven, and they had seen humanity's response. The message was clear. Humans could be the best friends or the worst enemies in the galaxy. Dr. Monica Torres, who had weaponized terraforming technology during the war, returned to her peaceful research after the Zalani surrender. But she kept copies of her weapons research locked in secure files. I hope we never have to use these again, she told her research team. But if another species decides to test us the way the Zalani did, we'll be ready. The three survivors of New Haven, Ben Torres, Lisa Park, and Joe Miller, were present at the memorial dedication ceremony. They had spent 2 years giving testimony at trials and helping investigators understand exactly what had happened during the massacre. We saw our families die, Ben Torres said in his speech at the ceremony. We saw our friends and neighbors murdered for no reason except that they were human. We lived through hell, but we also lived to see justice served. Lisa Park planted the first tree in the memorial garden. The Zalani wanted to erase New Haven completely. They wanted to make it as if those 50,000 lives had never mattered. Instead, they created something that will ensure those lives are remembered forever. The memorial became a pilgrimage site for humans throughout the galaxy. Parents brought their children to see the lights and to understand the price of freedom. Military officers came to remember why they served. Diplomats came to understand the limits of patience. 5 years after the war, a new human colony ship departed Earth carrying families eager to build new lives among the stars. The ship was called the New Haven's Hope, and it carried 10,000 colonists to establish a farming community on a distant world. But this time, the colonists traveled under the protection of the Memorial Fleet. Escort vessels surrounded the colony ship as it made its way through space. The lesson had been learned by all. Humanity's children would never again face threats alone. Young Danny Price was 12 years old when his family boarded the colony ship. He had been born after the Zalani War, but he had grown up hearing the stories. He understood what the memorial lights meant. He knew why the escort ships were there. As the New Haven's Hope reached its destination, Danny looked out at the stars through the observation deck. Other alien ships could be seen in the distance, but they kept a respectful distance from the human convoy. They had learned to treat human civilians with care. "Mom," Danny asked, "why do the alien ships stay so far away?" His mother, Carol Price, put her arm around her son's shoulders. "Because they know what happens to people who hurt human children, sweetheart. They learned that we're kind and peaceful, but only as long as they treat us with respect." Danny nodded thoughtfully. He had read about the Zalani in his history classes, about how they had thought human compassion made humans weak, about how they had learned the difference between kindness and weakness in the worst possible way. "They thought our kindness made us weak," Danny said, repeating the famous words from President Adams' speech. They learned the difference between kindness and weakness the hard way. The colony ship landed safely on its new world. The colonists began building their new home under the watchful protection of the Memorial Fleet. Children played in fields that would soon grow earth crops under an alien sun. Families built houses and schools and hospitals, creating another peaceful human community among the stars. But this time, everyone understood the truth that the Zelani had learned too late. Human compassion was not weakness. It was a choice. And when someone Thray